I perceived it all in my spirit. I hear it, my spirit man heard it, and I was like, I don't feel like doing it. I just heard the voice of God, and I'm like, I am terrified. And that night, I kid you not, it was hard for me to go back to sleep because it shook me to my core. Hello and welcome in to the Thrive with Dee podcast. I'm excited because today we're going to talk about how to hear the voice of God. Now, this topic is important to me, and the reason why is because with so many voices that are out there, I mean, you got your voice, the voice of the enemy, voice of strangers, whatever all these people are listening to. You got witches out there, wizards, like you got all these type of things out here. So we definitely want to make sure we are hearing the voice of God, and we know that it's the voice of God for sure. Okay, so this week, my husband showed me something very creepy. He showed me, if I can insert the clip and I find it, I'm going to go ahead and insert the clip. But it was this clip of this guy who the police arrested, and he was inside, I believe it was Walmart. He was inside of Walmart, and inside of Walmart, he all of a sudden I don't know what he did. I don't know if he stole something, but the cops arrested him, and it was supposedly said, I don't know if this was what supposedly happened. Inside of Walmart, he was fine. But when they put him inside the car, he started to manifest badly. And you can definitely see that there were some spirits that were speaking through him, and it was demonic. So when you hear that voice and how distorted it is, no one's going to go and say, oh, that's the voice of God, because there's no peace in that. It was extremely creepy, and it was demonic. It was horrible, like really bad. When you take a look of how this guy because I said he sound creepy. It was a very distorted voice. He was even the way he was answering the cop, it was horrible. So you can tell that there was no peace in that voice. What I have experienced with the voice of God in my life, I'm going to share a story with you, is that the voice of God is discerned. It really is discerned. You got to pick it up. Yes, God can speak audibly to you. He can say, hey, Charles, this is what I'm speaking to. Yeah, he can, but he don't speak like that all the time. So God's voice is really discerned. So here it goes. So one time, this was years ago, I had this experience, and I'm going to share this with you guys. So I used to be a hairstylist, and my friend and I, we took a job opportunity in Art Basel, because if you're a hairstylist, any hairstylist on here, leave a comment below. Let me know if you're a hairstylist, you know what I'm saying, just in case I need something done. But so we were styling hair in Miami at Art Basel. We had models. There were models coming in, and we would be in this room. I believe it was with R&Co, and we had to, style their hair. And it was a great little opportunity to do. We were in the midst of, it was worldliness, a lot of worldliness, especially, being in Miami. But anyways, it was a good opportunity to build our portfolio and say, we did Art Basel with R&Co, the company, and it was great. So here's what happened. So when we were leaving, I forgot who it was who handed us, but I was a believer at the time, maybe, I don't know how many years into Christianity, but I know I had my kids, and they were very, very young. They were like babies. And so all of a sudden they gave us this bottle. It was a bottle of, it probably was champagne wine. I don't know the difference, to be honest with you. And I really don't care. And so they gave this to us. They gave her one and they gave me one. And so that night, we drove from Miami. We drove home. We went home, and we were living in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach. We drove home. So when I got home, it was pretty late. My kids are in bed. My husband's in bed. And I take the wine bottle and I put it on the counter, my kitchen counter, because I'm like, hey, no big deal. I'm going to throw it away in the morning. I don't need it. I don't want it. Now, I have to share a little bit of something. I don't know, but I had some thoughts about drinking at the time. It wasn't necessarily for me to drink, but I could feel there was like a drawingness to it. Listen to this. It was a slight drawingness, and I knew, I was like, no, I would never do that. Like, that's not my thing. So I said, I'm going to throw it away when I wake up in the morning, whatever. So I go to bed. I go to bed that night, and when I am in bed, this experience happened, and I do not know. Like, I really want you to imagine it as I say it. So this experience happened. So I don't know if it was a dream or a vision, whatever it was, but I know it shook me to my core. And what began to happen was, as I slept, all of a sudden, as I'm in deep sleep or whatever it is, I see that there is these streams of light coming towards me. The streams of light were kind of intertwining though. The whole background was dark. It was black, pitch black, but streams of light was coming towards me. I saw purple and blue and orange and fuchsia. Like it was so many. It's like streams of light. And when the streams of light was coming towards me, I can immediately also hear the sound of like thunder. It was as fast as the light was coming towards me, it was as fast as the sound, the thunder, the waves. It was like a big sound that was coming towards me, right? And when the sound came towards me, all of a sudden I hear, "You've been set apart." I hear this. I hear this voice. And I woke up from it. And when I woke up, I leaned over to my husband. I grabbed him because I was so terrified. I grabbed him and I was like, "Babe." He's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I just heard the voice of God." And I'm like, I am terrified. And that night, I kid you not, it was hard for me to go back to sleep because it shook me to my core. And I knew immediately what this was about. It was about that bottle that I brought into my house that needed to get out of my house. Like it wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. And that's a whole nother story, but it needed to get out. And so the voice of God is really discerned. I could have woke up from that dream and said, that wasn't God, that was the enemy. But no, first of all, those words, "You've been set apart." And second of all, I understand the light that has to do with God. I understand the light that's surrounded around his throne. I understand that he has the voice of like many waters. So once I understood that, I was like, my spirit it was almost like in a blink of an eye, it picked it up. I instantly knew this, that the voice of God is discerned. Like, think about it when Elijah, if you guys remember that story of Elijah, when he heard the voice of God, but he thought like it would come in what's that story? When he thought that it would come in the thunder, the loud noise, all of this, but it was like a still, peaceful voice. You have to understand that the voice of God is discerned. So what has he been saying to you that you're like, I think it's God, I think it's God? You have to differentiate between your voice and God's voice and really define it with his characteristics, how he is. And so when that situation happened to me, like my spirit man opened up to how to hear God's voice better. I'll share another situation so you can know how God speaks, right? And so the other way was one day there was a piece of paper that was on the floor. How many of y'all have seen a piece of paper on the floor before and you're like, I ain't picking that up. Like, I didn't drop it. I'm leaving it. Guilty. Call me guilty. If that's not you, you're better than me. Call me guilty. Anyways, it was on the floor. And when it was on the floor, I heard the voice of God say, pick it up. With this one, I perceived it all in my spirit. I hear it. My spirit man heard it. And I was like, I don't feel like doing it. So I proceeded. I like wanted to leave. And I heard it again. And then I heard it again. And I just want to say to you, with that hearing and that hearing again, the voice of God hammers. It hammers. Like he's going to repeat something. When he's speaking to you, he's definitely going to repeat it. And so when I picked that piece of paper up, that obedience really unlocked my ears. Now you would say that's crazy. No, I'm not crazy at all. That act of obedience opened up my spiritual ears to be able to hear more. I'm going to read something to you really quick, and hopefully it makes sense when I read it. When I say the voice of God is like it hammers. Okay, I'm going to read something to you really quick. Psalm 62 verse 11 says, God has spoken once, twice I have heard this. The power belongs to God. There's another scripture when God was speaking. Just hear this right here. Genesis 41 verse 32. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by God and God will quickly bring it out. Have you ever had like a dream where the dream keeps repeating and repeating? You're like, I can't stop having this dream. Do you think God is giving you that dream? Especially if it's 3 times. I mean, it's just sealed. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. or like if it's a negative dream, deal with it, pray with it in the spirit. But this is how you understand that God is speaking to you. It's not going to be sometimes in a loud, audible voice. He's going to speak to you. And another way for sure is to understand, like, it burns within you. Now, this is what I mean when it burns within you. Okay, I'm going to read this verse to you guys, and hopefully it sticks out. Okay, Luke 24, verse 32. Jot it down. I hope y'all have y'all notebooks, because y'all could write this down. But Luke 24, verse 32 says, "And they said to one to another, did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us by the way, while he opened to us the scriptures?" So I had a situation one time when I was first learning to hear the voice of God. This was like before the situation happened with the wine. And I was part of a ministry, and I was learning to hear the voice of God the first time. And I already knew, like, and you have someone who don't really want to mentor you, but I was home one time and I began to hear this word, and it began to really bubble up in my belly. Like, it was bubbling up. I knew, and how I felt was, if I don't get this word out of me, I'm about to explode. And number one, the word was for somebody I really did not care about. When I mean I did not care about, this person hated me, hated my guts. And I had this word, even though they didn't say it and they pretend to be the Christian lovey-dovey person, I had to get the word out. So I called this man of God at the time, and I said, "Hey, does it feel like this when you have a word to give to someone?" And I began to explain to him what I'm feeling. I said, "I feel like there's a burning on the inside of me, and I can't shake this word." I said, "Is this the way it feels?" And I waited for him. I had wisdom, y'all. I waited for him to say yes. And the moment he said yes, I said, "Great. That person that's with you, I have a word for them." And he was just like, this was on the phone, and he was like, "Okay." And I just shared the word with the person. Regardless if they received it or not, I knew I was hearing from the Lord. Don't let nobody shut that down. So when you hear the voice of God, it's going to burn within you, because it's discerned. It's something you're picking up. It's a perception. And then there's people who audibly hear the voice of God, and that's not many times. Okay. And so it's like, it's a perception. You definitely know that God is speaking, and you're like, this is the word. I can't shake it. And another thing that begins to happen too, because I felt this, and like, for people who hear the voice of God here, have you heard something that sounds ridiculously crazy that you got to do? Because the prophets did. Ezekiel had ridiculous things he had to do, prophetic acts that he had to do, right? And so for me, what began to happen was, when I would hear the voice of God, it was weighty. So if you're trying to differentiate and say, is this my voice or is this the voice of God? The voice of God is weighty. It's heavy. Like, when you have to do the work, when he's telling you to do something, it is weighty. You cannot, you try to shake it off and you're like, I just can't shake this thing. I got to give you this word. It's not your anxiety. You're not having a full panic attack mode. It's just literally you're hearing it and you got to give it. And I'm going to share something with you, especially as a prophet. What begins to happen is, if you don't release that word, my prophets, listen up. If you don't release that word, you don't be a good steward of that word, you start to not hear his voice so much anymore. And you're probably like, why? Because he likes faithful stewards. So why would he give you words? Why would he speak to you to get something done, right? As a watchman, maybe if you're a watchman, he's giving you, he's warning you, he's telling you things. But if you're not doing anything with it, he can go and speak to somebody else who's actually going to do something with it. What do you think? This is a game, doing it for fun? No, it's weighty. And you have to understand that it's not always going to be loud. So when you get into a small, you got to go into a place. What I like to do all the time is, in order for me to hear the voice of God, I cultivate that atmosphere. And the atmosphere that I cultivate in my home is for me to be able to hear the voice of God. And this is how I train my children. Yep, my little babies, I train them how to hear the voice of God. How we do it is we're not second guessing. We're not making any assumptions. We're not saying that's not the voice of God. We're sitting there, we're praying, we're seeking to hear him. And as we're seeking to hear him, what the first thing that comes to you, go ahead and write it down. Go ahead and jot it down, or speak to mommy and daddy and tell me what it is that's going on so that we can bear witness. This is the training ground. For me, I go into my secret place. I turn my music on. I begin to pray. And as I'm praying, I don't know if you guys have experienced this. As I'm praying, I literally I started praying. I'm like, I asked God, what's on your heart? The moment I'm focused and in tune and I forget about myself and I'm really attuned to him, he starts to speak. And everyone is waiting for that loud, audible voice, and God can just start to drop downloads in your spirit. It can be revelation. You can hear, go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and you're like, wait, was that my mind? Is your mind telling you to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13? And once you go there and all of a sudden, now try it, go there. Don't make any assumptions and say, that's my mind, I'm not going to do it. I kid you not. I've done this before. And I would go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 if God led me there. And all of a sudden, that's a chapter about love, right? You go in there and you start to read it, and all of a sudden it bears witness with your spirit. Maybe you weren't loving on your family the other day. Or maybe you weren't loving on your friends or whatever it is the other day, or you forgot about love. Or maybe you're in a season in your life as a prophet, as, someone, and you're like, I got the gift, I'm prophesying, but at the same time, you can't deal with people. You don't like being around people. You can't stand somebody, and God's trying to remind you about love. Now, I'm not saying this happened to me. I'm not saying this happened at all. But what I am saying to you is that this is how you train your ears to hear the voice of God. Because what I understand is he will speak to you. And this is what's happening to me, is he will speak to you in one way, and then he start to change it up. Has anyone experienced that? If you have, go ahead and leave a comment below. Like, I really want to read your comments and see if you have experienced that. Leave a comment below if you are here on YouTube, and if you're listening from somewhere else. I would love to hear some feedback. You can send me a DM, send me a message, and let me know how your season has changed on hearing the voice of God. Because for me, it was a lot through dreams, because God speaks through dreams. In one season, it was so much. In the very beginning, it was always through dreams. And then here and there, he started to kind of like sprinkle some like the audibleness. And then one time it was just like, I'm discerning the voice of God. But it was primarily through dreams. And then I realized as well, what I started to realize was as soon as like the dreams kind of slowed down. And I used to look at it as an attack. And I'm like, this is an attack on my dreams. Like, I cancel and I bind, I destroy. You know how you start going into prayer, like, I call forth my dreams. I want my dreams back. I need to remember. And yes, that's important. But, I actually asked a mentor of mine, I was like, listen, like, God, I used to dream a lot. Like, this is what's happening. He was saying, he's like, actually, I don't really dream that much at all. He says, God could be trying to speak to you in a different way. And that's what hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, he is. Because lately I was starting to hear him in different ways. And I would literally just be waking up in the morning, washing my dishes, or getting my kids ready to take them to co-op because we homeschool. And when I was getting ready to take them to their co-op, I would hear something, like something would just pop up in my mind or pop up in my spirit. And I was like, okay, but I held on to that thought. And I would come home later in the day and my husband confirms it with something he tells me about someone. I'm like, that happened. So I want to let you know that God speaks that way too. If you really want to know how God speaks, look at different people in the Bible. You can see that God spoke audibly as well. But that heartburn one for me was important. That weightiness of God's voice is important when you understand the magnitude of his voice versus yours. I can sit here right now and say, I really should go on a diet. I could sit here and think about it. Yeah, it carries some. But when God speaks to you and say, your body's a temple, take care of it now. And if there's if there's something with it, you're almost like, oh my God, like you you felt it, it's like almost like a gut thing, like, So that's to me on how to really discern the voice of God is lean in, trust him, make no assumptions, understand that he's going to confirm multiple times. His voice hammers. It's like a heartburn. It burns within you. It's like fire shut up in your bones. And that's how to discern his voice. So he will speak through the Bible. He will speak through prophets. Yes, there are prophets these days. Yes, there are. And he will speak through apostles, preachers, evangelists. He will speak through every believer. There are the voice gifts, absolutely, but he will speak through every believer. He will speak through anything. He will actually even speak through your children. And how I know he's speaking through my children is it confirms, it resonates, it burns. There's a conviction that happens. It's not just like could that be God? No, like I know that is God. And how a special prayer that you can do is to really say, God, help me to be sensitive to you. Let my spirit man be sensitive to hearing your word, hearing your voice. Open up my ears to hear what the Spirit of the Lord is saying. Like I said, that previous guy, that other guy, that's the voice of the enemy. The voice of the enemy will lie. The voice of the enemy will manipulate. The voice of the enemy will cause fear. The voice of the enemy will cause you to bow down at demonic systems where God is like, no. His voice, if there's a fear with it, it's a fear of reverence for who he is, because he is sovereign and he is almighty. And believe me, if God says something, you're going to know. It's going to be confirmed. You are going to know. And that's it. Like, it's super simple as that. Discerning the voice of God. Just lean in, trust him, get your journals out, begin to write, y'all, begin to talk to him and just see definitely what he's saying and see how it resonates. If you practice this daily, the more you practice the presence of God, the more you worship, you begin to hear him. The more you say, God, what's on your heart today? What is on your heart, God? I just want to hear what you are saying. The more he can trust you as his daughter, as his son, so that you can hear. And you want to hear the voice of God so you can know how to thrive in this season, how to move forward, because we're thrivers. And in order to thrive, we need to hear the blueprints, the divine blueprints from God. We need to hear what he's saying. So I challenge you today to practice, to go in and say, God, what are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying? And then talk to somebody. If you really want to know for sure, talk to a trusted person, a pastor or a leader, someone you trust actually hears the voice of God, not religious. Don't go to no religious demons. I'm going to tell you right now, because if you go to those religious demons, they're going to shut your gift down. Anybody understand what I mean? They will shut your gift down so quick. So share it with somebody who you trust, who actually hear the voice of God, and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Does this resonate with you? Or if you got a word for somebody, go up to them and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Does this resonate with you? That's how you're going to practice. That's how you're going to practice. Write things down, ask them, does this resonate with you? Don't be afraid. Or if it's a leader, say, hey, this is the word that I heard. I heard it. I just want to know if this bears witness with your spirit. You don't have to just leave it to that one person. Share it with multiple people and see. People you trust, though. Don't be like the Joseph situation, him telling dreams to people and they don't really trust him. Share it with people you trust. I hope that this episode really blessed y'all. Once again, thank you for tuning in to the Thrive with Dee podcast. I cannot wait to see what God is going to do in your life as you're tuning in and taking these keys and just listening to these stories as we're having these conversations and seeing what happens to you. Just take it, run with it, and do something with it. God bless y'all.